a special gentleman, Johns from Secretly Group. And we're going to talk about the indie labels and indie publishers and how a huge label like Secretly, and it's more like a group, I guess, a group of music companies can navigate in the music industry and help indie bands to succeed and make a big change, I guess. Yeah, just as a short intro to you and the company, you're head of international operations at Secretly Group and played a key role in the international campaigns of artists like Mitski, Bon Iver, Angel Olsen, Kruang Bin, Slowdive, Sharon Van Effen and many others, I suppose. Was that a correct list?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And just a few words about the company, if you don't know Secretly. They've had an amazing year last year, I guess. One of their biggest success, which we're going to talk about, is Mitski's My Love, Mine, All Mine, which was a huge success, the top 50 on the TikTok viral, I think, and was just a 6-week #1 on the charts almost everywhere, I guess, and it was a major runaway success. Yeah, Secretly had a huge year. They had all kinds of nominations, Oscars, Grammys, Liberas, Polaris Prize, everything you can name. They just had their 25th anniversary, the Secretly distribution.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just grew in every level that you can imagine. I think you have like 3 million copies sold worldwide. So
there or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's a pretty big number. Yeah, so thanks for being here. I'm sure
Thanks for having me.
you'll have a lot to say to us about the secrets and tips and tricks of the company and the industry. Can we start with your role at the company and a little bit about how it's structured and how do you work on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I'm the head of international operations for Secretly Group, but then I also work across Numero Group, which is our reissue label, and All Flowers Group, which includes Ghostly International and Drinks and Water, who are kind of newly part of the family. It's kind of I'm heading up quite a new team, and it's part of the parcel of the label group. Having grown so rapidly over the last few years, what with the recent successes that were mentioned. So I head up our international team of label managers that we have on the ground in Germany, France, Benelux, Australia, and then a team of label managers as well in the UK. So my position is kind of more from a bird's eye point of view, overall business strategy, working very closely with our third-party distro partners, digital teams, PR teams on the ground. I think that kind of covers it.
Okay, that's okay. And which are the artists that you look after the most, or is it?
So I oversee our kind of all of our repertoire, all of our releases. So, but I mean, there's some which we kind of which we naturally lean in on more. Mitski being one of them, but yeah, across the whole roster and all of the labels in that sense.
Okay, and because it's an international company, like how do you structure and divide the task between the different offices and centers?
There's a certain amount of natural, for want of a better phrase, prioritization has to go on, like in terms of what we know is going to work within a given market. So we'll benchmark against other indie labels, other similar artists, and we'll look at the data and we'll see what is clicking in a certain market. So a certain amount of prioritization is done to that extent in terms of staff resources and budget. But in terms of the UK in particular, we have a team of European project managers that are there, and each artist has a European project manager, and they manage the campaign from a European standpoint. So yeah, I think in terms of our internal structure on a project basis, each artist has 2 project managers, one in Europe, one in the US, an A&R and what we call a sponsor, which is, I suppose, one of the partners of the company, one of the founders. So they're still extremely hands-on in pretty much all of our projects as well.
I used to manage a band 13, 15 years ago, and we were bombarding secretly Canadian to try and get on the label, but I only got like out of office messages, I think. So it wasn't the way.
I was doing the same, and the only way I could get in was by getting a job there. So rather than
yeah, so it obviously wasn't the right way to go about it. What is it like? How do you pick bands, or how does this dynamic work with new bands?
It hasn't changed, like in the sense of that I know that a lot of companies, for better or worse, use A&R tools that look very heavily into the data. From a signing perspective, it's still about our A&Rs, getting recommendations, going to shows, like just kind of ear to the ground and what's popular. But yeah, and I suppose from that point on, it's just, I mean, it's about whether that kind of, after A&Rs and the labels meeting with the artist, is about whether it clicks. It's a relation from us, like from our standpoint, it's a relationship and it's a partnership, and that has to work in that sense as well.
Is it usually like the band has to stand out to some extent, so you guys spot it and then
I mean,
reach out?
Kind of looking for those artists which are kind of part of a culture, part of a community, that we're looking at artists and we can see 1, 2, 3 albums down the road and beyond. We're not looking for quick successes. We're looking at building something with an artist. And like that goes both ways for an artist looking at us and seeing if we're the appropriate partner for them. But yeah, it's, I mean, as I think is, obviously, like authenticity and integrity are key. But yeah, I mean, I think especially over the past probably 4 to 5 years, Secretly has very much opened up in terms of genre-wise as well. With obviously, we'd still have artists like Bon Iver, and we had people like The War on Drugs, but we're less kind of American indie alternative rock, folksy kind of Americana now. But yeah, it's very much just being led by the culture as well.
So do you actively sign new bands actually, or is it
me?
Well, yeah. If you do, then tell us about it, or if the team in general.
Yeah. Well, in terms of how that team is structured.
No, what I meant was that. So okay, I circled back a bit. So you tend to work with artists on the long run and for a long time, and so there's not a lot of dropouts as far as I know from the label. So if
thankfully,
you're in it for life almost, you know. So that's why my question is that, are you actively always like looking for new acts, or it's more like a case by case basis? And if there's a spark between the company or someone, an A&R and the band, then it might happen. But otherwise, it's good.
I think the A&R team wish we'd sign more. I think there's a certain amount of like our team's capacity, but then also doing right by the artists that we work with as well, and we want to work everything. Obviously, we want to do right by the artists, work everything properly. Like whilst we are always looking to sign artists, we've also got to take into account, like, whilst we have a much bigger team than we used to, we still do have finite resources, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we probably have to go by this, that it's not easy to get into the Secretly labels, but perhaps you could help us learn from the trade, learn the trade a little bit and understand how you work with an artist who's, let's say, unknown in a certain territory. What is it that you guys look at? What sort of data do you read, and how do you try to work on it? So, because everybody hears that. Of course, you have to have your data right, and you have to understand your data. But what is the actual, like, how does it apply into strategy, and how do you work with that?
I think like looking at data and again looking at kind of similar artists and seeing which similar artists are clicking in certain territories. I think like the first fundamental thing we do with every release, whether it's a new signing or a returning artist, is really drilling into what the essence of the story of that record is, like what drove that artist to make that album, that art, and really like honing the story and the messaging. And that's the main thing that we've got to equip. We've got to equip our label managers, our publicists, our marketing team with, like, that's the kind of basis of everything. And I mean, we, beyond the data, like rely very heavily on the expertise of our international staff as well, and that's why we brought them on board. Like, there's just a certain element of intuition above and beyond any data about what's going to work, and that goes not just to our internal team as well, but we have a lot of trusted partners that we work with regularly, whether that's third-party PRs, marketing agencies. Like, we are still an indie, so we don't have like huge teams in every market. So yeah, and we trust their feedback on what is and isn't going to work. But yeah, I mean, we do use a lot of we use data tools to get a grasp on kind of that. I mean, that generally helps in terms of figuring out what we can project in terms of like success in any given territory. Yeah.
Okay, maybe could we go a little bit deeper even? Let's say taking the example of Mitski and her song, which was a huge runaway success on TikTok first, and then, as I understand, it spread to everywhere and became this huge cultural phenomena. Do you guys know the song that we were talking about? Yeah? Okay, most of you do. So can you give us some insights? Like, what was the roadmap, let's say, that led to this huge success, and how do you build on it?
I suppose, like, starting at the beginning, for those that don't know, Mitski is a American Japanese artist. She's been on Dead Oceans, one of the Secretly Group labels, for a good while now. We've released like 4, 5 of her records now, so it's a long-standing partnership. And yeah, I mean, for up until probably like 2021, 2022, she kind of inhabited a very standard pitchfork indie world, which was kind of fine. It's our kind of bread and butter of artists, and she had a successful career. And the record she put a record out in 2018 called "Be the Cowboy." Again, like a lot of critical success, but not monumental sales, which would have come later. During COVID, a couple of those tracks on "Be the Cowboy" really started to just take off. I mean, she had a really a really loving, enthusiastic fan base anyway. With TikTok blowing up as it did, especially whilst everyone was locked away at home, people really resonated with her music, which her lyrics are very intimate and heartfelt, and they really resonated with people during that time. Those tracks started to trend heavily. A couple of those tracks, I mean, were like over 1 billion streams now on Spotify. It really just shot up. She returned in 2021 with Laurel Hell, which was the first record since that trend had really started, and that just kind of went slightly mad as well, which to be honest, we were anticipating it to be big, but not as big as that got, and that was a new experience for us as a label, and has also been part of the parcel of us building our infrastructure in the way it has, because it's shown certain needs and certain gaps. It's meant that we're now, to be honest, more prepared for that happening again. There were some long nights and really pulling together when we were a smaller team when that was going on. But yeah, so Laurel Hell came out in 2021. That was 2022, sorry. That record went really well. To be honest, we kind of thought, well, the world, at least for their fans, thought that may have been Mitski's last record. She was kind of very publicly done with the music industry. At least that's what she was publicly saying. And she returned very quickly with the land is inhospitable, and so are we. And when we were delivered the record, we thought, right, this sounds like an Americana record. This is great, but maybe it doesn't have the commercial opportunities that maybe the last one did. We're like, okay, well, this is great. Though fans are going to love it, and we kind of prepared as such. We were like, put the record out, and My Love, Mine or Mine wasn't even one of the pre-release singles. We had a feeling that one would resonate with fans, but we didn't quite anticipate it literally skyrocketing from release day. Trending in every country, hit singles, top 10 singles charts in multiple territories. We had to react very quickly. Trying to a lot happened over this time. We had to react very quickly. We had to a lot of it was feeding a fire that was already happening. So in terms of like a lot of it was like influencer marketing, and we found out a lot of it was being driven in Southeast Asia. So we had to build out teams and territories which we didn't have teams in before. It was very fast paced. And I think that's also, I suppose, a beauty of being being in indie in this way as well, that I feel that we can be nimble to situations like that very, very quickly.
And so this huge organic success opened up certain doors that weren't open before, and you could walk into.
Commercial radio was because standardly, like for most secretly music, it's in most territories it's happening on like public broadcast radio. This gave us the opportunity to step up to commercial radio, where it's normally just kind of for Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and we were able to get an Americana country song and an indie country song, not like an American country song, onto commercial radio. DSP support was extremely strong. I mean, the amount of support we got from Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Deezer, all the likes of them was like beyond anything we'd ever had on any other campaign in terms of like out of home advertising, in-person fan activations, in multiple territories.
Sorry, just one second. What sort of support were you getting? And is it something that could be repeated, or is it repeatable to get that sort of support in other releases?
It's opened up doors for us, and that's as the same as Adele did for Beggars. Like, it opens up those opportunities because it opens up doors to us to people that may not have been willing to have conversations before. Like, despite having had like decent success with Bon Iver and Phoebe and multiple other artists, Mitski was on that song started to infiltrate like the public consciousness in multiple countries. And people wanted to get behind it and support it and show that they were a part of this journey. And so it means that when we have when we get an inkling of that there's another track, there's another artist which is on that trajectory, that makes those conversations much easier.
Yeah, and what could you take away from this success? What sort of key learnings that you could, try and perhaps apply with other artists as well?
Key learnings. I think it really showed. I think from my standpoint, from an international standpoint, looking at things on a much more minute market level, just again, because it kind of opened up doors to certain like media attention and certain like partners that we weren't necessarily. It's increased our knowledge of on an international scale. It's shown also the impact that I think it really taught us very quickly about like influencer and creator marketing as well, in a way that we didn't really have a handle on. Like every now and again, like we'd throw a bit of money on creator marketing and hope that it would do something, but to get to the minutiae and the detail that we did on this, I think as a team it really built out that knowledge massively.
And do you think that's something that the smaller artists could afford or should try and spend on?
I mean, a lot of what we did as well was with like micro influencers rather than big, like huge influencers on socials, and that was like putting little spends across the board. And we like did a lot of like direct outreach. We did get some agencies on as we went on, but like I would say it is like some of that stuff is accessible to developing artists, but it's very much about jumping on an existing trend. It's not something we're finding anyway. It's not something to engineer. It doesn't work like that. In our experience, it's very much about like looking at your data, looking at if something is over-indexing in a certain territory, looking at your leaning consumption rather than just your set kind of your streams, and kind of being very reactive to that.
And what kind of influencers were you approaching, and what kind of collaborations were these?
I mean, I didn't go too deep into this because this was like our marketing team that handled this, but it was
like lifestyle
I
vloggers
mean, the whole
and all
lot,
kinds.
like the trends were all over the place. So it was generally just like, I mean, the trends were for anything from just someone just sat in front of a camera crying to someone like there was a lot of dog footage, people singing to their dogs, and yeah, I think it was a lot of it was putting spend on people's posts that were reacting well naturally. So it wasn't only just reaching out to actual influencers. It was offering to like boost an individual's post that was getting organic reach, and we were seeing that work really well.
So the offer was that here, this is the great song. If you use it in your video, then we will boost your video.
There was some of that happening, yeah. But we were like very conscious of certain markets as well. Where certain like, again, like Southeast Asia as a region was very influential in boosting a lot of trends. They're very online, like very young and online like society in that way, and that was like had a massive impact, but on the campaign like outside of that region and globally.
Right. So do you think it's something that, let's say, artists or bands sitting here could apply somehow, or from with the limited resources, which is also relative, of course, but is it like a tactic that you think should be in the tool case?
I think like this is I'd say if it was something that was taking off naturally, it was something that I would explore, and there's people much better qualified on influencer marketing to answer this question better, but it's very much about like jumping on things, so whether there's that organic virality kicking off.
Okay, great. We don't have to go like all about this too much. But so how do you work with artists in terms of you're really conscious of their integrity and authenticity, but then also you have to think of commercialization and how to sell it and package it. So what is the dynamic there that you try to dance around?
I think that's something in which we try and get a grip on the signing process, is what's the artist's ambition, and it doesn't have to be like extreme commercial success. It's not like we sign a lot of artists where that just isn't their ambition. They just want to earn a living from their art, like a decent living from their art, and we're just there to foster that because we believe in their music. But yeah, I think from a very early point we get an idea as to what their commercial ambition is. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, and just what's the the fine line, I guess, between retaining or trying to help and keep their authenticity, and between, you know, making a success commercially.
Yeah.
Making them post certain videos where they pitch pre-sale tickets on sale, you know, or something like that. So it's
I mean, like you mentioned it there, but like socials is a very delicate topic with a lot of artists, and I understand why. Like, there's the pressures and wants of an artist are like more than they've ever been, and I think we're very conscious of like making sure that. I mean, we have an audience development and socials team that sit down with the artist and try and get to the core of exactly what it is they want to say, and like to get a grasp as to how often they feel comfortable posting, where possible. I mean, management teams, like when an artist does have a manager, quite heavily lean in on that. But no, I think like, and this goes like beyond socials as well, and down to like. I mean, Miski, for example, didn't do. I think she did one or two bits of promo in terms of like I think she did a radio interview, and like, I mean that's a luxury that Miski can afford to have at this point. But like, my kind of point being is that we very much tailor the campaign around what the artist is comfortable doing. I mean, I don't think we'd go into a partnership with an artist that isn't willing to do any promotional activity, because that makes it very difficult to sell the record. But yeah, it's very much artist led.
Yeah, and your tactics compared to a major label are very different, or you try to, you know, learn more and more to be hands-on with international matters like a major label, or do you try to keep in the spirit somehow?
I mean, I think that, I mean, just at the kind of, from my standpoint, I've always worked at independent labels, and my knowledge of majors is only heard through our artists and my colleagues that have worked at majors. But it comes back to that point of it being a partnership, and we're not. It's not scale at all costs. We're there for. It's a long-term relationship. We're not expecting instant success. I would say that we are closer towards like major label tactics than we used to be is simply because our infrastructure is built out, simply because and our resources have grown in terms of naturally, financially, and like on a human resource standpoint in terms of staffing. But yeah, I think that we're not in it for a quick success with any of our artists. That's just not the model. And I think it's the attention to detail and the understanding of culture on a deep level, which indies as a whole like really have. I mean, we've had multiple artists that have been signed to majors that have come to us and had really successful releases. And I think the thing that they come back to is just the amount of time and attention that they get in comparison to their time at majors, where it's very, very, from my standpoint, looks like it's very easy to fall through the cracks.
And from an artist's perspective, what do you think are the biggest like challenges these days to navigate the world, I guess?
I think biggest challenges
and also opportunities.
Oversaturation. I mean, I don't agree necessarily with what Spotify and Deezer are doing in terms of like capping, in terms of their tactics, in terms of trying to only starting payouts at a certain 1,000 plays. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there has to be. I think the model is tired and broken. I don't know if it ever worked, but now it really shows. And I think like what's difficult for us is simply getting paid. And because it's oversaturated, I do think that it's an incredible point to be in terms of the route to market has never been easier. It's never, and it's to some degree it's easier to find. It's easier to find. I think like it's easier to stumble upon artists than that you could potentially like than it ever was before. Yeah, I think things are more expensive. Like touring's expensive, and that's in my mind the greatest marketing tool there is playing live and getting out and playing in front of people. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's also good aspects to the reason why things are oversaturated is that it's never been easier to build to find help and get a sense of community and things like things like this and online versions of like this kind of thing. I mean that's amazing and it exists because of the kind of world we live in. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and how do you prepare as a company for the next couple of years? Let's say, do you have new security measures or new, I don't know, teams to search where to go? You know.
That's part of my fun job is looking at where we go next in terms of growth into other territories. And yeah, I mean, again, like going back to Southeast Asia and is a market which we're watching very closely. It's been extremely impactful for us. We've got, I mean, South America continues to be really strong for our repertoire. And they're just areas in which we're like looking to grow at a decent pace over the next few years, I guess.
And growing there means that you'd like to like export your artists there, or you're also looking to sign local artists?
I think I don't want to speak too much for the A&R team, but I think like I can imagine there being a point later on down the road where we have the expertise in order to be able to sign more like regionally local artists. But at this point, like our A&R team is so heavily based in the US and the UK. But I see that as part of our journey of growing. I think is adding actually boots on the ground in the A&R team and in other territories.
Yeah, how do you tackle the cultural differences or cultural challenges?
Yeah, I mean that is part of the interesting day-to-day of like my role of like exporting and like figuring out new markets for our artists is not just is very much getting into the cultural nuances of each territory. And I think there is always going to be some markets where like most of our music just doesn't work, and also being respectful for the fact that there are really strong domestic artists and people don't necessarily want international artists, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, like France, for example. Yeah. But are the countries like France in Southeast Asia or Latin America, are they similar in that respect? Like
Thailand's more tricky for us. I mean, Indonesia and Philippines are just crazy for a lot of our artists, but there are Thailand is a little bit of a trickier one. We're doing a little bit of work in some Middle Eastern countries because we've just signed an artist called Mustafa, who's from a Sudanese background, and navigating the nuances of that and being respectful is a really fun part of the job. But it's like, again, just doing right by the artist and also being respectful of the potential partners that are reaching out to. But yeah.
And when you work with such an international lot, I suppose a lot of issues come up that artists represent or stand for, whether it's social or political, whatever. Do you have some sort of policy? Like, how do you, I don't know, handle that or help, keep things in order? Or you just let all the artists, just stand and do whatever they want? Is there anything you'd like to share?
I mean, if there was anything that we'd deem incredibly offensive, I think that would potentially be relationship ending. But in terms of, I mean, we try not to get too involved in what our artists are saying about kind of current affairs, politics.
It's so easy to slip, no? You just see, this every day that someone just said something out of, I don't know, just being irresponsible or just not even thinking it through, and then careers are ending easily.
Yeah, I mean, we have had instances where we have had to step in and kind of advise and just try and like advise on the follow-up communication on their socials, or the follow-up on like the press around, like if we're doing any kind of PR to try and control that. But by and large, with like if it's social posting on politics, like with especially in the world we're in right now, we do largely try and stay out of it.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of just changing the subject, in terms of tools artists can use or should use, or the technology they can help their careers with, do you have any tips or tricks that you advise artists to use or keep their hands on and use in order to help their careers? Like when you get a new artist and you look through their arsenal, are there certain things that you suggest that work on this, and
I think as a tool, like one that I think as a company we don't like as a like I know bigger companies and indies have their own kind of analytics tools in this way, but we still find platforms like Chartmetric extremely useful in terms of getting a broad view on, especially when we're like benchmarking against other artists and getting a view on, from my standpoint, getting a view on what is working in a certain territory. And I think that can be handy for artists as well in terms of like knowing where to put your digital advertising spend, or knowing like where's the potential audience where I could tour if you're mapping out a European tour. Or I think like that gives that, because it's kind of all open for everyone to see. I think there is a monthly fee involved, but I think it's so invaluable like data at that level on other artists, and a deeper level. It enables you to get a deeper level of knowledge of kind of what's clicking in other territories.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have some time still, but do you have any questions, comments you want to ask? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Laszlo. The social networks algorithm are going to becoming more locally year by year. I can see it my personal feed and my content statistic. Do you have any strategy against this?
To be honest, I wish I did, but I'm not part of the marketing team. I know that is the case, and I know it's incredibly tricky. I think like it's such a thing that's been said to death at this point, but building up away from social platforms in terms of newsletters and owning your fan data is still really, really important. We see far more click-throughs and traffic through newsletters than we do in terms of any kind of organic posting. I think that, there's little we can do to really to circumnavigate what social media is imposing on our posts. I think it's really, really tricky. But yeah, if you don't already, I'd really advise, if you're like in building out your data set with a newsletter. That can also then be applied if you're then doing any paid digital advertising as well, like low level spend. But in terms of just like organic posts and trying to like work around that, I wish I knew the answer to that.
You briefly touched upon, you did touch upon cultural differences with like international outreach. What's your experience with language barriers? I'm not sure how much you meet that if artists are singing in English, but what about other languages, or even English in other markets where they're not as responsive to the English language because it's not so omnipresent in their culture?
That's definitely more the kind of like that. Yeah, that's more what we experience, and it's generally like working with trusting our local partners on the ground in terms of like translation. All of our kind of PRs and bios are translated. They're not put through Google Translate. We do a lot of we make sure that all of our paid digital advertising or any kind of ads are all localized and tailored as well to local tastes. So in Japan, there was a set kind of more verbiage on the advertising than there would be in say Western countries. Lyric videos for pretty much every track we put out in local languages. Yeah.
And when it comes to it comes to the music itself and the lyrics, do you have any experience with that? Like how to get into markets where the language itself is not either understood or as present? Obviously, I'm coming from the perspective of Hungarian music, but I'm just thinking about it in general.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there is, I know in the UK at least, I mean, we don't represent any artists that aren't singing English. I mean, we do, but I'd say that it's about finding those champions in that local market. I mean, I know in the UK, I know who those are, and but it's about pinpointing those champions who are really gonna, who are really gonna shout up. I mean, there's some promote non-English language music in the UK, then others there's radio shows that really get behind and international artists, and those then I feel can be elevated quite quickly if you get the right supporters behind. But yeah, I don't know if that's particularly helpful.
TV?
I would have two questions, if it's okay. The first one is that you talked about chart metric. What are the most important metrics that you check in case of already signed artists and when you're doing it for A&R? And I'll ask the second one after that.
In terms of the important metrics I'm looking at, I think it's just on a very basic level, looking at audience within that country. From my day to day, I'm looking at how much of an audience there is in that market, and across platform as well. I think and knowing what platforms are more popular in certain other countries. I know that YouTube is way bigger in some markets than it is in others, so that's going to give us a lot more of an indication as to what the actual fan base is there. So more geographics, fan demographic as well, getting an understanding of in terms of gender, which way the audience leans is really going to then impact the way we message certain things. And then there's also it can be more granular with some artists and others, but brand affinity as well, getting an idea as to what other artists, but also brands, other activities those fans are really into, I think can be really insightful.
And when you're targeting ads to these local markets, do you work with local marketing agencies, or you have your own marketing team for worldwide?
A mix. In many markets we have either secretly group staff members or out-of-house partners that we work with regularly. Otherwise it is done centrally from the UK or the US. Yeah.
Anyone else? Why?
When you feel the most uncomfortable when you're doing your job?
Quite possibly now.
No, what is have you ever had an argument or a person who made you really uncomfortable or had a difficult time to deal with? I don't want to go into gossip or anything. It's just
in just at work or personal life. I mean, there's been a lot of difficult conversations, and I think they get easier as you go on. I think we naturally become like labels and managers can offer quite often butt heads. That's a natural thing. The interests are sometimes like cannot be, or ideals cannot be aligned. I've had some uncomfortable conversations with artist managers. Yeah, but it always, I think, it's never a personal thing. It always comes out in the wash.
It's never personal, but it's always personal.
Yeah, they're on my dartboard. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah. So.
My question is about: are you experiencing a shift of artists wanting to move direct to listener versus, moving to act, and how are you building a strategy around that?
In terms of artists that want to just go direct and
like communications, merch, pre-sale, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, all of our artists still have their own artist merch stores, and we don't take a cut. We don't take a cut of that at all. That's their thing. We are do experience more artists wanting to go, wanting to bypass labels altogether, and I think that's a healthy thing. I see us as one of a few options. I think what we can offer is expertise. We can offer and very nuanced expertise, very local expertise. We can offer infrastructure. These are all things that doing it yourself you may not have. That's not to say that you don't have, because some artists do, and that's amazing. I think management teams are really building out their infrastructures. There's so many tools to do it yourself now. There's I think there's an AI manager, which scares the hell out of me. I don't want to argue with an AI manager. But yeah, I think we can still make a pretty good case as to why an artist should sign to a label.
And moving away from DSPs and direct to listener.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, I can see why. I mean, fandom's not built on DSPs. Whilst DSPs is a great they're a platform, a consumption platform. When you're not earning money on there, most of the time you're not built. There's no it's you listen to something and you stream something, and then that's the end of that journey pretty much. They've obviously posting up some T-shirts that you can then get linked out to, but yeah, I understand why people are bypassing uploading to DSPs. Again, going back to owning your data, Bandcamp is a fantastic tool. And yeah, I think if you can scale that and build up a following on platforms like that, I think it's much, I don't know, it's probably a faster way of probably making some money rather than the pitiful per stream rate you're getting on DSPs.
Anyone else? I saw another one. Yeah.
Again, it's communication related. So do you have a top 3 list of what not to do when you want to reach out internationally to an agency or anywhere? Yeah, that's the question.
The 3 things that you do when reaching out to a label. I would just tell us about why you're doing why are you writing the music that you're writing? Why is it important to you? Why is it that you wake up in the morning and that's the first thing you want to do? I think it's important to really get behind, for us to really understand that intention. Secondly, send the music. And a little bit of history in terms of what you have been doing, and whether that's touring or whether I think that's any key metrics is always a good thing to see. But yeah, I think the most important thing other than sending music is actually just a kind of an idea as to why it is that you're doing what you're doing and what your message is.
Anyone else? Last one.
How much does it matter nowadays where you are? So if you discover a great album somewhere in Europe, great artist, Would you like tell them to move to London, for example, or stay where they are? You know, what's the situation now?
I mean, I moved up. I've always lived in the UK, but I moved to London to do what I do because it is like the opportunities. I think are like consider more, like there's more of an infrastructure there, but I think that's why stuff like this is so important and why the team. Like I think it's important to try and build out the local scene. And we were talking earlier about in terms of like in terms of media support for local artists, it does feel like there's more and more of that building here. So, I mean, I think like one example is like Australia is like all their big artists have always just left Australia, and it's just left Australia in such a kind of certain points of a glut of talent where everyone's left for the US or the UK, and I just don't. It's not sustainable. So they're doing things like this to like build out grassroots and build out developing artists with tools is amazing. And it'd be a shame for talent just to move to London. Yeah.
Follow up to that, like somebody sings in English and believes they might have an international market, then what's the better choice? Like move and then start career there, or build up something locally and then kind of export themselves?
That's a tricky one. I think it's always good to have a track record. It's always good to have like proof of concept of like I have a fan base here and it's clicking, and but yeah, I'm not encouraging anyone to move to London.
Okay, anyone else? No. My last question is, what's your dream job at Secretly? Is if it's secretly, let's assume.
The job that I'm doing. Okay. No, but honestly, I think like right now, I don't think it's potentially that my dream job at Secretly doesn't exist yet, because I mean, it is what I'm doing now, because it's like it's amazing to have been part of the journey of the company growing from a student dorm in Indiana in the late 90s to where it is now. And I think it's the partners have really held onto their integrity throughout all of that. But yeah, it's the job that I'm doing now. But in terms of like future, I think the opportunities at the company are also going to change as we grow further. Yeah.
Then maybe rephrase a little bit. What do you enjoy most in what you're doing now?
I mean, the travel's great. Experiencing different cultures. It's not like something I did a lot as a child or anything, and just like I don't know, it's always fascinated me to get an understanding of what like drives music and culture in other countries, and that and I think it's kind of it's open, like trying to open doors for our artists, but also get an understanding of just like actually just appreciating the domestic artists and the scene for what it is as well, and even if that doesn't mean there are opportunities for artists there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks a lot for being here and answering all these questions and sharing your thoughts. If there's no other questions, then hopefully you're still gonna be here, right? Yeah. So I suppose they can walk up to you and share whatever they want in private. So see you again for the next session in 10 minutes, and we'll continue.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.